Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the ordinary meeting of Council for February 22. I'd like to begin by opening with an acknowledgement, 2023, pardon me. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of these lands, waters and skies, the Wadawurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging. We acknowledge and respect their continuing connection to their land, waters, skies, culture, and the contribution they make to the life and spirit of our community. We pay respect to elders past and present and extend this respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in the room tonight. The meeting is open at 7:01. And in addition to acknowledging traditional owners, I'd also like to use this opportunity to acknowledge the passing of a Borough of Queenscliff staff member, Shirley Hallmark, a dedicated school crossing supervisor who worked at the borough for 9 years. Shirley was much loved by our community and was known to make the simple act of crossing the road a joy for children and families, playing games with them and undertaking her role with warmth and creativity. We send our best to Shirley's family at this time and tonight recognise Shirley's contribution to our community. Item 2, present and apologies. So present from a councillor perspective, we have Councillor Michael Grout and Councillor Ross Ebbels. We have all officers present, and apologies we have from our acting CEO, Kelvin Spiller, Councillor Fleur Hewitt and Councillor Donnie Grigau. Are there any other apologies from an officer perspective? Nope. Item 3, pecuniary interest and conflict of interest disclosures. Councillors, any disclosures? No. Officers? No, thank you. Item 4, leave of absence of councillor. There are none. Item 5, public question time. 5.1, public question status update, and there are no public questions outstanding. 5.2, public questions, of which we have 3 tonight, and I believe some of our questioners in the room. So the first question comes from Peter Russell, who is not with us, but I understand is fine for us to read that out loud. Peter's provided some background to his question. So at the recent 16 of the 2nd, 2023 public meeting drawn and organised by the Queenscliff Climate Action Committee, QCAN, to launch their solar program, their President Kitty Walker and other QCAN speakers briefed the public in attendance, including some Shire councillors present, on the process to arrive at a QCAN delivery partner for the community solar program and the presentation to the assembly of their delivery partner, Vortex Electrical. QCAN briefed the meeting at their process of selecting a delivery partner, undertook QCAN oversight with 11 unnamed technical consultant. QCAN announced the Borough of Queenscliff paid for the cost of this consultant. No other details were disclosed to the meeting. So the question following this from Peter is, on what basis were these funds for the unnamed consultant given to the BoQ Borough, to the QCAN committee? Was this a selective grant? Were there other terms of QCAN attached to these QCAN grant monies? And what was the sum value of the QCAN grant? What supervisory oversight did the BoQ exercise to provide efficacy to use of public funds? Did QCAN provide to the BoQ a prior and post report to the process of selection of consultant? Did QCAN appropriately charge GST on the invoice transaction between QCAN and the consultant? And the transfer of public monies from the BoQ to QCAN does seek to excuse the BoQ from LGA transparency process on use of consultants. So to respond to one question, given our policy around one question through this process, I'll invite Stuart Hanson, the Manager of Infrastructure and Environment, to respond.
Thank you, Mayor Tolhurst. Good evening, councillors. Facilitation of a solar battery and heat pump bulk buy program is a key action within the Council adopted Climate Emergency Response Plan 2021 to 2031. The delivery of the bulk buy program is being undertaken in partnership with the community through Queenscliff Climate Action Now, as proposed within the SERP. QCAN undertook the expressions of interest process Submissions were evaluated for a robust formal evaluation process led by QCAN. The evaluation panel did not include a council officer. Council's contribution as a partner in the initiative was to engage and fund an independent expert to participate in the evaluation panel. The independent expert was environmental scientist Rob Catchlove, Director of Wave Consulting. The engagement of Wave Consulting was valued under $2,000 GST inclusive and was undertaken in accordance with Council's procurement policy. Funding to support the delivery of the SERP, including the facilitation of the solar bulk buy program, was allocated within Council's 2022-23 budget.
Thanks, Stu. Our second question comes from Lou Stewart, who's not here, so I'll read it out. The BoQ planning applications protocol identifies that a planning permit application that receives more than 3 objections is a trigger for the automatic initiation of a council briefing. When was the council briefing for the permit application number 2022/059 at 20 to 26 Hesse Street, which received 7 objections, and how was this briefing minuted? I note that a motion from a councillor is required to initiate a briefing where triggers do not apply. In this case, at least one trigger did apply. I'll invite Tim Crawford, our Manager for Planning and Community Safety, to respond.
Thank you, Mayor. Council requested a briefing on planning application 2022/059 for 2026 Hesse Street at the council meeting on 22 June 2022. Council has received a briefing on the planning application on 22 July 2022. Council has received an email update in August 2022 following the advertising period. This email advised that 5 objections had been received and outlined the key issues in the objections. Councillors did not remove officer delegation regarding the planning application.
Thank you, Tim. And our final question tonight, number 3, comes from Bob Ward. Bob, I've got your question written here. Would you like to read it out? Do you want to? Oh, I'm happy to. Okay. My name is Bob Ward, and I am the event coordinator for the Geelong Street Rodders. I'm here tonight on behalf of our event committee and members. We hold our Queenscliff Rod Run in Queenscliff the first weekend of Feb every year. This event relies on the tourist parks in the area for accommodation. These are governed by yourselves, the Borough of Queenscliff Council, and I believe you set the dates for the camping in the area for the next year at your council meetings. My request is, can you extend the dates for camping in the Victoria Park Green Zone, approximately 20 sites area, for 1 extra week in 2024 and beyond? Our Show and Shine event is the first Sunday of Feb every year. Your close-off date is so close to our operating dates in 2025 and 2026. The 30th and 31st fall on those 2 weekends. We understand that the cut-off date is the 31st of January, and we are asking for an extension through to the 7th of February to accommodate the visitors to your borough for this event. A sizable amount of revenue for these sites would we are sure, be of benefit to the tourist park and local businesses. This area was always available in the past prior to the COVID lockdowns. Your consideration of this matter would be greatly appreciated by our club, members, other hot rodders and visitors who come to Queenscliff for the event. Yours sincerely, Bob Ward. So, Bob, I'm happy to respond to that. The Vic Park Policy CP054 was adopted by Council at the ordinary meeting on August 24 last year. And as you know, stipulates the 6 weeks in which camping can occur, and unfortunately February falls outside that. Council acknowledges that the success of this year's Rod Run and the appetite to have these sites open will be taken into consideration when we review the policy later in the year. The review will consider a range of stakeholder inputs and considerations from visitors and our community members, but it will involve the full deliberation of Council towards the end of the year. The Borough supports the Rod Run, is committed to working with the committee and members to strengthen the event, and looks forward to your 2024 return. Did you have a follow-up, Bob? Thank you. So that concludes our public questions. We move to item 6, the confirmation of council meeting minutes. 6.1, ordinary meeting of council, the 14th of December, 2022. So councillors, we have a recommendation before us around adopting the minutes as an accurate record. Do I have someone to move that? Thank you, Councillor Ebbels, and seconded by Councillor Grout. Any comments on the minutes? No. All in favour? Thank you. Motion carried. Item 6.2, special meeting of council, 15th of Feb 2023. Again, we have a recommendation to adopt the minutes as an accurate record of this special meeting. Do I have a mover for that? Thank you, Councillor Grout, and I'm happy to second the minutes. Is there any comments people would like to make about these minutes? No. I'd just like to note that the special meeting and the appointment of an acting CEO has, to council's mind, created a need to amend our CP 053 policy, which is around CEO recruitment, remuneration, and the advisory panels that support that, to strengthen what the appointment and recruitment process of an acting CEO looks like. So while there's no direct motion related to that, it's certainly something I'd like to flag. I'll put it to the vote now. So minutes as an accurate record, all in favour? Thank you. Motion carried. Item 7, record of informal meetings of councillors. We have a record before us. Do I have a mover for the record?
Can I ask a question of you, Mayor, first?
You may.
Do we land on a need to add the meetings that we talked about?
One meeting does not need to be included, and the other can. The meeting that doesn't need to be included is the meeting with the CEO around remuneration and employment. But I understand that a workshop around Go Lightly Park, which involved officers and more than 3 councillors, is required to be registered in our informal list of meetings. So would you like to move an amended motion, Councillor Grout?
Yes, please. So let's make that change. And I forget the date that we met.
It was December 15.
Right. So 15th of December, if we can add the meeting, it was an assembly with council officers, and we talked about the Go Lightly Park caravan park in a context of the caravan park, some might say. So I'll add that, and then I'm happy to move as you can see there, the record of informal meetings that we participated in.
Great. I'm happy to second the motion, and then all in favour? Thank you. Motion carried. Amended motion carried. Item 8, notice of motion. 8.1, notice of motion status update. And the notice of motion update, status update, is presented in adjunct to item 8.1. The recommendation is that this record be noted. Mover Ross, Councillor Ebbels, and seconded by Councillor Grout. All in favour? Thank you. Motion carried. 8.2, motion on notice. No notices of motion were received. Item 9, petitions and joint letters. 9.1, petitions and joint letters. So in accordance with the Borough of Queenscliff governance rules, a petition or joint letter presented to council must lay on the table until the next ordinary meeting of council, and no motion other than to receive the petition or joint letter can be accepted by the chairperson unless council agrees to deal with the matter otherwise. So 9.11, the Springs Beach car park at Point Lonsdale. The content of the petition is before us, and it is signed by 214 people, 19 of whom are borough residents and 119 are non-residents. Councillors, do you have any questions on the matter? No. Do I have a mover for the motion just to put the petition on the table? Thank you, Councillor Grout. Seconded by Councillor Ebbels. All in favour? So passed. Item 9.1.2, Royal Park 2023-24 bookings. This is our second petition for the evening. And on February 9, Council received the petition addressed to Mayor and councillors from Royal Park campers expressing concern about the future booking capacity of the park. So again, the petition lays on the table and no action may be taken against it. Councillors, were there questions on this one?
No question.
No. Can I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Ebbels. I'm happy to second it. And all in favour of letting this petition lay on the table? Carried. Item 10, functions attended. We have a recommendation that the functions attended report be received. I am going to move the recommendation with some amendments. And that is that I attended on December 19, a Cottage by the Sea meeting with Andrew Ballum. On December 23, I attended a Point Lonsdale Board Riders Club meeting with the President, Max Lazarus. On January 24, I attended the Point Lonsdale Lighthouse, there was several attendees at this meeting, but council scheduled with the CEO a meeting about the Point Lonsdale Lighthouse Reserve and DECA grant scope. This contained community members Andrew Sutherland and Michelle Jepson, and councillors Tolhurst, Hewitt, Ebbels and Grigau were in attendance in addition to the CEO. On January 11th, I and the CEO met with Malcolm Lazenby from the Global Leadership Foundation. On January 11th, I met with Richard Clark from the Masonic Lodge. On January 19, I met with Michael Donoghue of the Queenscliff Coast Guard. And on the 16th of Feb, Ross Ebbels was in attendance at the QCAN solar program launch.
Oh, and Mayor, we have a typo at 14th of February. So our local member is Alison Marchant with an ANT.
Thank you, Councillor Grout. So if I can add that amendment to the spelling of our member for Bellarine's name from March to Marchant, that would be great. And in addition to the events attended, I'd also note that Councillor Tolhurst did not attend the CMMP PSG meeting number 1 or number 2 on December 16 and Feb 2 respectively. That was Councillor Hewitt. So as mentioned, I've got these edits in writing, but wanted to put them on the record here. So with those changes noted, can I have a seconder for the motion? Thank you, Councillor Grout, and all in favour? So passed. Item 11, Chief Executive Officer, and 11.1, Acting Chief Executive Officer Report. So the report I'm happy to speak to in the absence of our Acting CEO. The Acting CEO covers off a number of issues, including our Vic Park planting plan, an acknowledgement about the loss of our staff member, recognition of this community solar program, some activity for his first week, an annual plan update and some temporary staff changes. The recommendation is to receive the report. Do I have a mover for that? Councillor Grout. And seconder, Councillor Ebbels. All in favour?
And can I just make a point, Madam Mayor, that the annual plan update, which is commented on there, so our acting CEO has indicated he's in the process of drilling down to the next level in the detail of the 31 projects. And we are going to be referring to this item 16.1 in the agenda tonight. So we'll make further comment at that time.
Thank you, Councillor Grout. With the motion carried, I'd also like to note that it's great to have Kelvin on board. It's no easy feat to have one CEO out of action due to illness and then to quickly recruit another. So I thank our EMT and Tim Crawford for stepping up and holding the acting CEO position while Martin was away. Item 12, Health and Wellbeing. No reports to consider. Item 13, Environment. No reports to consider. Item 14, Local Economy. 14.1, Event Sponsorship Applications, December 2022, 2023. And we welcome Shannon Maloney to deliver this report.
Good evening, councillors. Thank you. I'll take this report as read, but in summary, our council received 4 applications for sponsorship for 2023. Bowen Heads Arts Council for the Ballerine Arts Trail, Shedding the Blues for Tune Up No. 3 Expo, Point Lonsdale Board Riders Club for Groms Off the Wall event, and Kim High and Charlotte Fraser for the Wellbeing Express. And tonight there is a recommendation for you for your consideration. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Shannon. Council, is there any questions for Shannon?
No questions. Just to maybe just clarify again that there is an unallocated funds left from the previous round of 2,842
Correct, yeah.
of that original 20, was it originally 20?
Mhm.
But there is a possibility of finding some additional funds transferring if
Yes.
needed.
Yes, we just have some minor
Thank you.
funds left in the event space. Mhm.
Given that, Madam Mayor, I'd like to move the following. Yep. That Council 1 accepts the applications and assessment as presented in this report and determines an allocation of funding to A, Barwon Heads Art Council, the Ballarat Arts Trail, the sum of $1,000. B, Shedding the Blues Queenscliff Tune Up number 3 Expo, the amount of $2,000. C, Point Lonsdale Board Riders Club, Groms Off the Wall, allocation of $2,000. D, Kim High and Charlotte Fraser, the Wellbeing Express. Given the commercial nature and the limited resources as indicated by the officer, at this stage will decline to accept any funding for that event. D, request the Chief Executive Officer to enter into an event sponsorship agreement with each of the successful applicants, subject to event applicants meeting event management permits if applicable. Thank you, Mayor Tolhurst.
Thank you, councillor Rebels. I'm happy to second the motion, and then we'll put it to the vote. All in favour? Oh, you want to speak to it? Pardon
Sorry.
me. Sorry, councillor.
That's
Rebels.
it. Yeah. No, I just wanted to say that the 3 events that we have elected to sponsor, events that have in one form or another ran before and proven to be successful, and also a benefit not just to visitors but also to our community members as well. So I certainly endorse the recommendations that we put forward tonight, Madam Tolhurst, Mayor Tolhurst. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Rebels. Councillor Grout, any comments before we put it to the vote?
Yeah, look, I'll just suggest that everybody turn up for the Shedding the Blues this year, if it is going to run with that sponsorship. It was a great event, and it actually did attract quite a lot of people from the Bellarine Peninsula and Geelong. So it does attract people to town.
Thank you very much. With that, I'll put this motion to the vote, amended motion to the vote. All in favour? Thank you. So carried. Thank you, Shannon. That brings us to item 15, Heritage Planning and Infrastructure. 15.1, Planning Permit Activity Report, and we welcome Tim Crawford again to the lectern.
Thank you, Mayor. The Planning Permit Activity Report for February 2023. I take the report as read and happy to take any questions.
I'm happy to move.
Oh, I'd like to ask a question first, but thank you, councillor Grout. And that is, Tim, if we could have an update on number 6 McDonald Road, please, which is item 2022/044.
Sure. The senior planner is still making inquiries with the consultants, statutory authorities and applicant, and will come back to council with more information to inform decision-making in council.
Thank you, Tim. Any follow-up questions?
Yeah. Can I ask, has it been normal practice for this council or for councils to get ecology reports? I know obviously we get heritage advisory reports done on planning applications. Have we and do councils as a matter of course get ecology assessments done? There is one done by the applicant, and certainly DELP, as it was then, now DECA, pointed out that there was some gaps, if you like, in that report. So, you know, is it a practice that we could get another expert to have a look at what the ecological issues would be?
I'll take that on notice, councillor Grout, and talk to the senior planner and come back to you with a response.
Great, thanks, Tim.
Any further questions, councillors?
No, not on the report.
No. Can I have a mover for the motion? Thank you, councillor Grout.
I'm happy to move.
Seconder for councillor Ebbels, and I'll put it to the vote. All in favour? Thank you. Motion carried.
Can I say, like with this report, or can I just compliment, I think, the town planners for getting through a bulk of work there. 33 is quite a lot. I know we've had Christmas period, so it means it's a couple of months worth of work, but you know, people taking holidays as well. So 33 was a good number to get through. So thanks for giving us a lot more manageable quantum of planning applications to look at. Thank you.
Thanks, councillor Grout.
Thank you, councillor Grout. That brings us to 15.2, planning permit application 2022/014 at 66 King Street. So Tim, we're in your hands
Hang on,
again.
can I, what I want to do before we move to the next item, can I actually make a request for briefing? So I'd like to move that council receives a briefing due to community interest in the following planning application. And that's 2022/105. And that's 70 Mercer Street, Queenscliff.
Yes, councillor.
I've moved it.
Yeah, thanks. I'm happy to second that, councillor Grout. And then we'll put it to the vote. All in favour for that briefing. Thank you. So carried. Thank you. That does now bring us back to 15.2 when we're looking at planning permit application for 66 King Street.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll take this detailed report as read. This matter culminated in a planning review meeting on the 15th of February last week, and I'll recommendation for council to make a decision on this permit application, Mayor.
Councillors, are there questions for Tim?
Not at this stage.
No, but I'm happy to move this recommendation as is.
I'm happy to second the motion.
And then in talking to this motion, which is this motion here refuses to grant the permit, just to be clear, that is the recommendation of the officer of the town planner too. And there are a number of clauses there. If you have a look at the agenda paper, look, in summary, point 1 is about the neighbourhood character, 2 is about the design and development overlay, and 3 talks about the streetscape and the proposal to deliver a ramp down to a basement, which is would be unusual in the whole of King Street. But in talking to this refusal, I wanted to make a few points about those main issues. Urban character, we know, is a really important characteristic in planning. We've talked a bit about heritage in this chamber. Here is an issue which is not impacting so much on the heritage aspects, but it certainly does on neighbourhood character. And neighbourhood character matters, and it mattered to the people that made submissions to the distinctive area landscapes. And both Queenscliff and Point Lonsdale were identified for having particular coastal characteristics that were of value to the whole of the Bellarine and then to the people of Victoria. So I think it's incumbent on this council and the officers to identify what those characteristics are and where we think that's being cut into. We need to actually make statements. I think urban character does matter. This proposal is introducing a large cuboid form, and it appears to be inconsistent with the mix of predominantly single story and smaller residences in this precinct. Skyline views also matter, and our clauses do talk about skyline views. And this site is quite high on the ridge. It's just off the top of the ridge. It would be, and this proposal has a form with a long skylight on top of the roof. That means that quite potentially it's going to stand out both from views up the street from Swan Bay to this proposed development, but also from King Street. And you can see that when you walk down King Street towards Swan Bay. When you look at that view now, you can see there's a house with a fairly unusual roof form that is actually dominant in the skyline. So this house will sit beyond that, further up the ridge. And that was another issue that for us matters. The streetscape obviously matters. And this proposal introduces down ramps and a wide rectangular block to the street. Now, what the neighbours think also matter. And in our planning review meeting, we were able to hear what some of the neighbours thought. And particularly when those neighbours have respected this neighbourhood character when developing their buildings. So we listen to these comments and we look at these proposals in that context of our planning scheme. We want to encourage contemporary architecture, but that architecture really does need to respect the key elements of urban character in each of our precincts. Some of that is described, I should say, that is described in our planning scheme, but I recognise that our planning scheme isn't watertight. In the planning review session, one of the objectives did refer to these guidelines that were developed in 2000. And when you look through these guidelines, and they're guidelines here for the urban characteristics of the borough of Queenscliff Town, of Point Lonsdale, of the foreshore. So these guidelines are quite a good indicator that we should be presenting, a town planner should be presenting to applicants when they're looking at developing sites or renovating buildings in each of those areas. It talks to the characteristics that are important in each of the precincts. So I'm quite keen that we as a council explore with our council town planners how we might use this effectively with new applicants so that we can guide them toward, if you like, architecture that fits better with our precincts.
Thank you, Councillor Grout. I'd also like to speak for the motion and agree and acknowledge that our planning scheme does have flaws, but it is the document which we invite people to make submissions and applications to. I took seriously the arguments presented by both the applicant and by neighbours and objectors in our planning review meeting last week, and always find them very valuable forums to tease out these ideas, which, while fixed in the scheme, also can be interpreted pretty differently. But here we are charged with making a decision. So I want to acknowledge that I think the arguments made by the applicant around density and needing to explore that as a community are important, but I don't think their application went the way to achieving that in a way that's respectful to urban and neighbourhood character in this area. I do think the documents Councillor Grout presented are very important to entrench in the process and to expect that applicants have read and adopted in their planning. And in addition to that, I think it was David Mitchell who presented some points around ensuring that applicants present narratives describing the attributes of neighbouring properties and acknowledge attributes of architectural treatment in the relevant BoQ documents. There was a number of other submissions and ideas that Mr. Mitchell made, but I think they were some of the key ones that I'd like to see this council adopt moving forward. Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor Tolhurst. I'd also like to endorse my fellow councillors' comments, and certainly it's probably a difficult one for councillors to grapple with, because I think overall parts of the application I thought were really good and well thought out. Unfortunately, I don't think they actually fit in the urban character of that area. They may be better potentially in some places at Point Lonsdale, or probably more places in potentially Ocean Grove. But certainly some of the comments in regard to the urban character and the detailed design, I actually quite liked the proposed driveway access. Some people didn't. I quite liked it. I think it actually hid the driveway, which I thought was actually a good design. And also the plan of reflected the building forms is considered to detract from the broader eclectic form of the area. Well, I think that's it isn't eclectic, and that means there is quite a deal of different types of design in that area. But overall, yeah, I think the urban character, I think it's too imposing for that area, and I'll be voting in favour of the recommendation put forward by the senior plan.
Yeah, or the recommendation to refuse the permit.
Yeah.
With that, I'll put it to the vote. So all in favour of adopting the recommendation? Motion carried. Thank you, Tim. That brings us to item 15.3, the asset plan. So I'll invite our Manager for Infrastructure and Environment, Stuart, back up to the lectern.
Good evening again, Mayor and Councillors. The purpose of this report is to present the asset plan 2022-2032 to council to adopt. The draft asset plan is attached to tonight's agenda as Appendix 1. I'll take the report as read. However, I'd like to note the significance of the asset plan as a high-level public-facing document that communicates the importance and magnitude of the infrastructure assets for which Council is a custodian. Council's asset plan has been drafted in accordance with the requirements of the Local Government Act with the guidance of Local Government Victoria's Asset Plan Guidance 2022 document. Officers have also conformed with the Institute of Public Works Engineering Australasia's recommended asset plan content and structure. Adoption of the asset plan is a requirement of the Local Government Act 2020. The asset plan seeks to align the council plan, council vision, council budget and financial plan. The asset plan is supported by a suite of asset management plans, one for roads and footpaths, buildings, urban stormwater drainage and open space, which have previously been adopted by council. The recommendation is on page 60 of tonight's agenda, which is the council adopts the Borough of Queenscliff Asset Plan 2022-2032.
Thanks, Stuart. Any questions for Stuart, councillors? Councillor Grout?
Yep. So I have one question, then I'm happy to move the recommendation. And that question is about those asset management plans that sits underneath this overview. So you indicated there that we had 4 different management plans that drill down into each of those asset classes.
Yes.
They were issued, as I understand it, in 2019. Can you explain what that means, and can the public access those documents in any way?
Yes, absolutely. So the council of the time considered the asset management plans at the ordinary meeting held on 20 June 2019. And those plans are available through our website, through the link to our past meeting minutes. The asset plans are attached to those minutes as an appendix.
Right. So if they interrogate the website for the meeting minutes from June 2019,
yes,
they'll see them. Right. That's the question.
Thank you, Councillor Grout. I've also got a question around why the asset plan, because I understand it's not going out for public consultation, why that's the case.
So the asset plan is subject to council's, in accordance with the Local Government Act, will be subject to council's deliberative engagement practices following the election of a new council. Development of the inaugural version of the asset plan was not subject to that requirement.
Thank you, Stuart.
So I'm happy to move that motion.
Great, I'll second the motion, pardon me.
Can I then speak?
You can speak to the motion. Thank you, Councillor Grout.
Yeah, so I think in moving to adopt this overview plan, we're complying with requirements of Local Government Act 2020. And there have been several people in the borough who have been asking for this document for some time. So I'm pleased to see that we've presented this. I'm going to suggest to my other councillors that, and I'm not sure what the process should be here on this one, but I'm going to suggest that we ask our Audit and Risk Committee to have a look through the asset management as it's assessed here in this plan for comment. So I'm just going to flag that in comment.
In speaking for the motion, it would also be good to explore how we can make those documents more public. It sounds like at the moment they're sort of entrenched in the agenda of a 2019 meeting, and given the interest and given the significance and importance of these documents, it would be good to make sure they're readily accessible on the website. Anyone else wish to speak to the motion? No, so we'll put it to the vote. All in favour of adopting the asset plan? Thank you, councillors. Carried. And thank you. Oh no, I think you're still with us, Stuart. You are. Glad to have you here, because that brings us to item 15.4, the draft active transport strategy for 2023 to 2031.
Thank you, Mayor Tolhurst again. The purpose of this report is to present the draft active transport strategy and to seek council's endorsement to commence the next phase of community consultation. The draft active transport strategy is attached in tonight's agenda as Appendix 2. I'll take the report as read, but by way of introduction, I would like to note that the active transport strategy is a key action of the community's climate emergency response plan under the sustainable transport pillar. This strategy also directly aligns with the 2021 to 2025 council plan, specifically the strategic priority 6 within the heritage planning and infrastructure portfolio, which seeks to facilitate walking, cycling and active transport. The report's recommendation can be found on page 66 of tonight's agenda. The recommendation is that Council A endorses the draft active transport strategy. B requests the CEO to finalise the graphic design layout of the draft active transport strategy prior to placing the document on public exhibition. And C, once design is complete, places the draft active transport strategy on public exhibition, inviting submissions for a period of 14 days.
Thank you, Stuart. Any questions for Stu? No, but I've got a mover, Councillor Grout.
Yeah, I'd like to move it, but with just one adjustment, and that is the period for submissions rather than 14 days, make it 28 days. And then when I speak, I might explain why.
Seconder for the motion, Councillor Ebbels, and then you wish to speak to the motion, Councillor Grout.
Yeah, please. So I'm really rapt to see a presentation of this draft. It's been probably taking a bit longer than we might have liked, but I'm really pleased that we have a draft that we can now get further community input into. We do think, we talked about this afternoon, we do think that for particularly community groups, but also for individuals to consider this and to then provide the more considered feedback. A bit longer time was necessary. There's quite a lot of detail in the draft, and really we would want you to focus your attention on the strategies, because they are the ones that we would look at. Well, we want to see if we've missed anything. We want to see if there's things in there that shouldn't be in there. And we also want to see if we can improve the way we're presenting these strategies, because it is a plan for quite a ways into the future. You're not going to see all the things in all these strategies carried out, even in my term on the council, which is only 2 more years. So we invite your input. You've got a bit of time there to provide that input. I think the initiative is a great initiative for residents here and for visitors to the borough. And as the manager for infrastructure environment said, this is an action that was adopted in the SERP in 2021. It is something that's being consistently put into 4-year plans. I noticed it was in the previous council's 4-year plans. So I'm really pleased to see we're getting a bit more of a coordinated approach to how we as residents and visitors might move around the borough. If we can facilitate that with infrastructure changes or improvements, that's what we're seeking to do here. And we want to, as far as possible, minimise the use of fossil fuels in getting around a borough that, for a lot of us, it's quite possible to walk or cycle around. So I'm commending this plan for community consultation.
Thank you, Councillor Grout. Councillor Ebbels,
thank
do you
you.
wish to speak?
Mayor Tolhurst, and agree with the comments made by Councillor Grout. And also, I think when you look at the documentation, you see that the amount of input came from other strategies as well to form this is really important. For example, our pedestrian safety, the SERP obviously, but other cycling strategies as well. And our towns are quite unique, and even, particularly when you look at the township of Point Lonsdale, where there are most of those side streets don't actually have footpaths. So we've got to be really careful about how we plan for the future, and whether it's, we need to slow traffic down. We need to make it actually more accessible for people to walk and ride their bikes and feel safe. If they feel safe, they will use it, which is obviously the outcome we as councillors want to have as well. And I was going to ask in regard to, as Councillor Grout pointed out, for the inviting submissions for a period of 28 days, but the people who made submissions, will they be automatically sent a draft copy? And how will we make sure that the community, the broader community, and people who submitted and the networks know that this is going on public display?
So we'll certainly proactively approach the stakeholders that we've engaged with to date, and that includes the schools, Bella and Community Health, and stakeholders that engaged within the community workshops. I'll have to take on notice the question about all submitters. I'm not sure what details we have of the submitters in terms of contact details of those people who submitted in through the online crowd spot.
I think it'd be important if we could, even if it's through our social media channels, to let those people know as well. And I think one of the reasons, quite rightly, Councillor Grout wanted to extend the time was also for our community groups. We know, our community 14 days sometimes is pretty quick to get a community group together and get them to all agree and then put it in writing. So I think given we've got two of the presidents here, they'll be grateful for an extra couple of weeks to get their submissions in. So, okay. Thanks, Stuart.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. I'd also like to speak for the motion and acknowledge that this is kind of a visioning document. There's a lot in it. We do welcome feedback on all components of it. And while the strategies are prescriptive to a degree, of course, it takes the adoption of those strategies and more close work with our community and the relevant agencies to understand exactly how they'd be applied. So in reading it, I'd encourage readers to keep that in mind. This is a policy or a strategy that has intergenerational benefits for our community. It helps us achieve the 3 key goals in our SERP, and it really involved a lot of stakeholders who are going to have ongoing roles like the Department of Transport, like VicPol, like the SERP, like young people, like school principals, etc., who manage, vast amounts of young people. So I'm really enthusiastic about what it can do and thrilled to see it live and out to the public for consultation. So with that, we will put the draft active transport plan to the vote. Thank you. So all in favour, that was carried. Thank you, Stuart.
Thank you, Mayor and Councillors.
That brings us to item 16, governance and finance. The 16.1, the second quarter report for the annual plan 2022-23. And I believe I'm inviting Gihan up. Are you presenting? No? Oh, pardon me. Great. Not a worry. We can wade through. In the absence of our acting CEO, we have before us the quarterly report, which seeks to review how much progress has been made against the items stipulated in our annual plan for 2022-23. This plan was adopted on September 28, 2022, and it sets out, as I said, the projects and programs, the deliverables, who's responsible, and the dates for completion. So we have a recommendation before us to note the quarterly report period from October 1 to 31 December of 2022. Councillors, before we get a mover, do you have any questions about this report?
I have no questions.
No, I thought we had a bit of a chat about this. We had a look at it, and we also are mindful of the acting CEO's comments, which I referred to earlier in his report. I think
I'm happy.
I'm happy to move that we deferred the noting of this report to the March meeting. But in doing so, I'd like to thank the officers and the MT in regard to the new structure and format of the annual plan. I think it's a lot easier to read for us councillors, and hopefully that is easier to read also for the general public in our community as well.
Thank you, Councillor Ebbels. I'm happy to second that motion and note that the acting CEO's intention was to tease out more about the degree to which projects have been progressed. So it's about getting a deeper understanding for us and in turn the public about which projects are close to completion or perhaps slightly less so. And I think there were a few items and inaccuracies in the report which are probably just best amended before we adopt it or review it in full at the March ordinary meeting. Any comments from you, Councillor Grout, at that stage before we?
Yeah, so we've moved and seconded this motion. And are we going to vote? Or
we are, but would you like to speak?
No, I'm happy. I think you've said everything that he's saying. I think it is important that we give the acting CEO an opportunity to catch up on where some of these are at, recognising that he's been with us for, three days, and he has read quite a lot of the background documents, and he has talked to quite a lot of some of the stakeholders in the borough. So he needs to get his head into where 31 different action items or projects are at. And I think I would appreciate seeing next month a more accurate version of where we're at after that review. Yeah.
Thanks, councillor Grout. So all in favour of deferring the noting till March ordinary meeting 2023. All in favour. So that is carried. Item 16.2, 2022 to 23, quarterly financial report as at 31 December 2022. Welcome, Gihan, our Manager, Finance and Corporate Services.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, councillors. I'll take the report as having been read, but would like to add a few comments. As mentioned on the page 93 of the agenda, the forecasted cash surplus for the year is 118,000, and this is after allocating funds amounting to 505,000 for 3 capital projects mentioned in this agenda paper. Again, we can find more details about those capital projects within the agenda paper, as well as in the detailed quarterly financial statement. In summary, the forecasted year-end results meet all our financial sustainability indicators that we have identified in our council plan, except for adjusted underlying result. We know that the adjusted underlying result is basically the difference between our ongoing income and ongoing expenses, including depreciation. So there's a moderate deficit that we have forecasted for the year, but there's a significant, again, improvement compared to the surplus that we looked at when we were finalizing the budget for the year. So again, we can find more details in our the detailed financial statements. In addition, this agenda paper covers provide an update in relation to the local government's performance reporting requirements. And as provided at the appendix 3B, there are 24 qualitative measures to assess the soundness of our governance and management framework. And it is expected that we will achieve all of those requirements by the end of the financial year. And again, as provided at the appendix 3C, again, BARA is well within the expected range for all reported indicators in relation to the financial sustainability, the service performance, and sustainability capacity. So those are the indicators specified by the department for us to report our performance against. We have not reported against 3 indicators because we don't have the required data to report against those 3 indicators. The councillors, the recommendation is on page 92.
Thank you, Gihan. Questions for Gihan at this stage?
No questions, but I'm happy to move it. But I've got a question. Sorry, Councillor Grant.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you to comment about this adjusted underlying result, which is a key metric for us, as I understand from the wonderful training I received from you a couple of years ago. How does this result, which is another deficit, we're at minus 1.15% here, that's 123,000 in deficit. How does that compare with our previous years? And how does that stack up against other councils?
Through you, Madam Mayor, thank you, Councillor Grout, for that question. Again, as we know, the underlying results reflect whether we generate a reasonable operational surplus to manage our asset renewal requirement. So even if you look at our financial plan, what we forecast a moderate deficit, because what we consider for this calculation is the depreciation expenses. We assume depreciation expenses reflect our asset renewal requirement. It's a very theoretical assumption, so in practical it's a bit different. So we have been reporting this moderate deficit even for the last couple of years, but there were some years because of the advanced receipt of the financial assistance grant, it was not really reflected in the reported the result. But if we average everything out, so always we have been reporting a moderate deficit. But one thing we can be sure, BARA has always been able to secure external grant funding for asset renewal requirements. So I think even into the future, there are those potential. So managing a deficit around 100 to 150,000, as we have forecast, may not be a challenge for the borough. And given the size of our budget, it will be really difficult for us, for the borough to achieve a surplus and maintain a surplus. So always borough will, being a small council, we will have to rely on some external grant funding to manage our asset renewal requirements. So that is something even we have highlighted in our financial plan as well.
Then I've sort of got a follow up. I don't know whether it's a question or a point, but I just noticed in relation to that, the forecast was for a higher underlying result, a higher deficit. Sorry, a higher deficit. I think it was double that. There's an improvement, it says here, in the forecasted underlying result now against the previous forecast, mainly due to additional income from tourist parks. And yet, you know, at the time, I think back in, anyway, whenever it was, in June, we're looking at a proposal to close caravan park sites in Victoria Park in order to protect the vegetative values of a public park, because that's a dual use park. It's not just a caravan park, it's also a public park. And in closing those sites, we were warned that this was going to actually cost the borough revenue quite a substantial sum. And yet we've closed some 30 sites, I think, but we've got additional income from the tourist parks. So something's going on here.
Is there a question, Councillor Grout?
Well, is it a question? I don't know. I'm making an observation, I think.
I think I'm inviting you to make a question of your statement, if you wish.
Yes, I'm just making a point. Okay.
Did you want some extrapolation or commentary on how that's ended up being the circumstance?
No, look, I think I've made the point, or made the point that I wanted to have made, and I think it's quite important that we understand the underlying result is the sort of averaged, if you like, or adjust. It is the adjusted deficit, and it does matter, that number. So I know to look at that number. Yes, we're always in deficit, but it's not significant. It is a manageable deficit, and that's how we choose to run our finances. So appreciate then the effort of the tourist park operator, the ones running the park this year, in compensating, if you like, for closing some sites. But we've obviously attracted sufficient patronage to make up for that gap. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Grout, for your question/point. Any more questions before we get a mover for this motion and recommendation from Gihan?
No, I'm happy to.
Happy to move. Thank you, Councillor Eccles. Seconded by Councillor Grout. Did anyone want to speak?
Just quickly, I just wanted to thank Gihan, as always, for his comprehensive report. And as much as council and the community never like to see financial overruns, we understand the last few years during COVID, you know, things have happened and delays, and you know, even with the hub, with the latent conditions, particularly with the southern wall of the library, unfortunately you don't find out some of these things till you start construction. But I think the end result is fabulous. And also even with the P1 huts, I think to do them properly, I think if anyone hasn't, or if you haven't been out there recently, they're nearing completion in the next couple of weeks, but I think they look fabulous. And I think in the end, to go better quality stainless and marine grade corrugated iron, I think it's money well spent, and it's great. And having been on council, this is my 6th year. It will be nice to finally have this Queensland Sport and Rec area project completed as well. Thanks, Gihan. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Eccles. Councillor Grout, did you wish to?
No, I think I gave my little speech before, didn't I? I'm sorry about that.
I'd just like to also thank Gihan and Jody and your team for the work. It's a lot of work, and you're always flexible and very open with communicating that to people who, as we all acknowledge today, are not accountants by trade. So we appreciate you kind of meeting us where we're at. And that's true of all the reports that are presented here this evening. With that, councillors, I'll put this motion to the vote. So all in favour? So carried. Thank you. Gihan.
Thank you.
That brings us to item 17, the authorisation of signing and sealing of documents. 17.1, employment contract to appoint Kelvin Spiller as acting Chief Executive Officer. So at our special meeting last week on the 15th of Feb, we resolved to sign and seal the employment contract and appoint Kelvin as our acting CEO. So we have a recommendation here to appoint Kelvin from the period of Feb 15 to April 6. I'm happy to move. And Councillor Grout will second. All in favour? Thank you. Carried. Questions without notice. And item 18.1, questions without notice status update. There are no questions without notice are outstanding, which brings us to item 18.2, questions without notice. Councillors, any questions
No,
without notice?
It's all.
For me, I'm ready for it. Thank you, councillors. Item 19, list of council meetings. 19.1, proposed change of date for the March ordinary council meeting. So it's proposed that the meeting that's currently scheduled for March 22 be pushed out a week to March 29 to enable the Mayor and Acting CEO to attend the G21 delegation in Canberra. So that's a week pushed out. At the same time, I don't know if we have a location yet. No, to be advised location, but essentially we have a recommendation that council hold the ordinary meeting on March 29 on Wednesday, the 29th of March, 2023 at 7 p.m. and that we give notice via the council website for this change of date. Someone to move. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Rebels. Councillor Grout. No comments before we put it to the vote? No. All in favour? Thank you. Carried. Item 20, closed session of meeting. So our time is 8:02 and the recommendation is that in accordance with sections 66(1) and 66(2)(a) of the Local Government Act 2020, the meeting be closed to the members of the public for consideration of the following confidential items. 20.1, confirmation of 14 December 2022 confidential council meeting minutes. So I now invite